New kings and kingdoms. Many new dynasties emerged after the 7th century. Map 1 shows the major ruling dynasties in different parts of the subcontinent between the 7th and 12th centuries. Look at the map. The emergence of new dynasties. By the 7th century, there were big landlords or warriors chief in different regions of the subcontinent. Existing king often acknowledged them as their subordinates or samantas. They were expected to bring gifts for their kings or overlords, be present at their courts, and provide them with military support. As samantas gained power and wealth, they declared themselves to be Mahasamantas, Mahamandaleshwar, the great lord of a circle or religion, and so on. Sometimes they asserted their independence from their overlords. One such instance was that of Rashtrakutas in Deccan. Initially, they were subordinate to the Chalukyas of Karnataka. In the mid 8th century, Dantidurg, a Rashtrakuta chief, overthrew his Chalukya overlord and performed a ritual called Hiranyagarbha, literally the golden worm. When the ritual was performed with the help of Brahmanas, it was thought to lead the rebirth of sacrifice as a Kshatriya, even if he was not one by birth. In other case, men from enterprising families used their military skills to carve out kingdoms. For instance, the Kadamba Mayurashrama and Pratihara Harishchandra were Brahmins who gave up their traditional professions and took to arms, successfully establishing kingdoms in Karnataka and Rajasthan respectively. Administration in the kingdoms. Many of these new kings adopted high surrounding sounding titles such as Maharaja Dhiraj, Great King, Overlord of King, Tribhuvan Vana Chakravarti, Lord of the Three Worlds, and so on. However, in spite of such claims, they often shared power with their samantas as well as with association of peasants, traders, and brahmanas. In each of these states, resources were obtained from the producers, that is, peasant, cattle keepers, artisans, who were often persuaded or compelled to surrender part of what they produced. Sometimes these were claimed as rent due to a lord who asserted that he owned the land. Revenue was also collected from traders. 400 taxes. The inscriptions of the Cholas who ruled in Tamil Nadu refer to more than 400 terms of for different kinds of taxes. The most frequently mentioned tax is veti, taken not in cash but in the form of forced labor, and kadambe, or land revenue. There were also taxes on touching the house, the use of ladder to climb palm trees, assis on succession to family property, etc. Are any such taxes collected today? These resources were used to finance the king's establishment as well as for the construction of temples and forts. They were also used to fight wars, which were in turn expected to lead the acquisitions of wealth in the form of plunder and access to land as well as trade routes. The functionaries for collecting revenue were generally recruited from influential families, and positions were often hereditary. This was true about the army as well. In many cases, close relatives of the king held these positions. Uh, Prahastis and land grants. Prashastis contain details that may not be literally true, but they tell us how rulers wanted to depict themselves as valiant, victorious warriors. For example, These were composed by learned Brahmanas who occasionally helped in the administrations. The achievements of Nagbhat. Many rulers describe their achievements in Prashastis. You read about the Prashasti of the Gupta ruler Samudragupta last year. One Prashasti, written in Sanskrit and found in Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh, describes the exploit of Nagbhatta, a Pratihara king, as follows. The king of Andhra, Sindh, Vidarbha, part of Maharashtra, and Kalinga, part of Odisha, fell before him even as he was a prince. He won a victory over Chakradha, the ruler of Kannauj. He defeated the king of Vanga, part of Bengal, Anarata, part of Gujarat, Malwa, part of Madhya Pradesh, Kirata forest people, Turksha, Turks, Vatsa, Matsya, both kingdoms in North India. Kings often rewarded Brahmins by grants of land. These were recorded on copper plates, which were given to those who received the land. What was given with the land? This is a part of Tamil section of a land grant given by Cholas. We have demarcated the boundaries of the land of by making earthen embankments as well as by planting thorny bushes. This is what the land contains: fruit bearing trees, water, land, gardens, and orchards, trees, wells, open space, pasture land, a village, antils, platforms, canals, ditches, rivers, silt laden land, tanks, granaries, fish pond, beehives, and deep lakes. He who received the land can collect taxes from it. He can collect the taxes imposed by judicial officers as fines, the tax on betel leaves, that on woven cloth, as well as on vehicles. He can build large rooms with upper stories made of baked bricks. He can get large and small well dug. He can plant trees and thorny bushes. If necessary, he can get canals constructed for irrigations. He should ensure that water is not wasted and that embankments are built. List all the possible sources of irrigations mentioned in the inscriptions and discuss how these might have been used. Unusual for the 12th century was a long Sanskrit poem containing the history of kings who ruled over Kashmir. It was composed by an author named Kalana. He used a variety of sources, including inscriptions, documents, eyewitness accounts, and earlier histories, to write his account. Unlike the writers of Processes, he was often critical about rulers and their policies. Warfare for wealth. You may have noticed that each of these ruling dynasties was based in a specific region. At the same time, they tried to control other areas. One particularly prized area was the city of Kannauj in the Ganga Valley. For centuries, rulers belonging to the Gujara, Pratihara, Rashtrakuta, and Pala dynasties fought for control over Kannauj. Because there were three parties in this long drawn conflict, historians often describe it as the tripartite struggle. As well as we will see page 62-66, rulers also tried to demonstrate their power and resources by building large temples. So when they attacked one another's kingdom, they often choose to a target which was sometimes extremely rich. You will read more about this in chapter 5. One of the best known of such rulers in Sultan Muhammad of Ghazni, Afghanistan. He ruled from 997 to 1030 and extended control over part of the Central Asia, Iran, and the northwestern part of the subcontinent. He raided the subcontinent almost every year. His targets were wealthy temples, including that of Somnath, Gujarat. Much of the wealth Mahmud carried away was used to create a splendid capital city at Ghazni. Sultan Muhammad was also interested in finding out more about the people he conquered. An interested scholar named Al Biruni to write an account of the subcontinent. This Arabic work, known as the Kitab ul Hind, remains as important source for historians. He consulted Sanskrit scholars to prepare this account. Other kings who engaged in warfare include the Chamanas, later known as the Chauhans, who ruled over the region around Delhi and Ajmer. Delhi and Ajmer. They attempted to expand their control to the west and the east, where they were opposed by the Chalukyas of Gujarat and the Gandhavas walls of western Uttar Pradesh. The best known Chamana ruler was Prithviraj III, 1192, who defeated an Afghan ruler named Sultan Muhammad Ghori in 1191, but lost to him the very next year in 1192. A closer look, the Cholas. Look at the map. From Udaipur to Tanjavur. How did the Cholas rise to power? A minor chiefly family known as the Muttariyar held power in Kaveri Delta. They were subordinate to the Pallavas king of Kanchipuram, Vijayalaya, who belonged to the ancient chiefly family to the Cholas from Udaipur. Captured the delta from the Matriyar in the middle of the ninth century. He built the town of Tanjavur and a temple for the goddess Nizamuddin there. The successor of Vijayalaya conquered neighboring regions and the kingdoms grew in size and power. The Pandyan and the Pallavas territories to the south and north were made part of this kingdom. Raja I, considered the most powerful Cholas ruler, became king in 1985 and expanded control over most of these areas. He also recognized the administrations of the empire. Raja's son Rajendra I continued his policies and even raided the Ganga Valley, Sri Lanka, and countries of Southeast Asia, developing a navy for these expeditions. Splendid temples and bronze sculptures. The big temples of Tanjavur and Gangikonda Cholapuram, built by Raja and Rajendra, are architectural and sculptural marvels. Chola temples often became the nuclei of settlements which grew around them. These were centers of craft production. Temples were also endowed with land by rulers as well as by others. The produce of this land, look at the picture, went into maintaining all the specialists who worked at the temple and very often lived near it. Priests, garlands makers, cooks, sweepers, magicians, dancers, etc. In other words, temples were not only places of worship, they were the hub of economic, social, and cultural life as well. Amongst the craft associated with temples, the making of bronze images was the most distinctive. Chola bronze images are considered amongst the finest in the world, while most images were of deities. Sometimes images were made